So my name is Patty, and Nick is going to do this thing. Let Nick introduce himself a little bit and get going. I'm going to close the door so we can.
Perfect. Sounds good. All right. So my name is Nick Cassel. I'm the Invasive Species Program Coordinator for the Chippewa, Luce, Mackinac Conservation District. If you say it 3 times fast, you win a prize for the day. So it's a lot of fun acronyms, you know, it's one of those things. You start working in public service and public works. There's always acronyms for everything, right? And so everything that we do at the Conservation District is grant funded. Years and years ago, the conservation districts all around the state of Michigan used to receive state funding, state allocated funding. That has since been pulled. So everything we do, we have to write grants for to continue to do work. So living on soft money is a very fun and interesting thing. So when we do write these grants, if any of you are familiar with grants, a lot of times you have to put forth a certain amount of what's called in-kind match or leverage to prove that you are, you know, doing the work that you're doing. You're providing stuff towards the grant as well. And as part of that, we do a lot of education and outreach. This is kind of why I'm here today, to promote invasive species awareness and management. And what we do is we bring sign-in sheets to everything that we do. I know you guys probably already signed in once, but if it's okay, I'll just pass this around real quick. This shows the grantors, how many different people throughout the years we get out and talk to in the general public. So it helps leverage our grant monies and continue to bring money to the EUP to do different natural resource projects. So if you guys wouldn't mind, I'm just going to pass this around, and then you guys can just leave it in the back when we're done here. So I will get going. Invasive and invading. So when I give these talks, it's always every single time it's different.
This is the largest freshwater lake in the world.
They're gonna beat us with the projection, I think. But I'll just talk louder. That's all right. We'll have a competition. So when I give these different talks, it's very interesting and unique because we always get different answers everywhere I go, depending on the audience. When you guys think of the term invasive species, is there any particular species that immediately comes to mind? Everybody has a different one, but anything. Zebra mussels. Big one in our area, right? Purple loosestrife, that's great, yeah, purple loosestrife.
Trying to think the carp's name.
Asian carp, right. So you guys are doing great. I mean, listing a plant is even great because generally when I do these talks, these are the top 4 species that come to people's mind immediately when I say, what do you think of when you hear the term invasive species? Oh no.
They were too loud next door.
They blew up.
I just stopped. The Watershed Conservancy work with Trans-Canada Trail, Ontario, to implement
Technical
kilometer watershed as part of our national great trail.
It was working, I couldn't. No
In the old days, we just had slides.
Right?
The technology is wonderful.
Yeah, but even those, the bulbs would burn out. I don't remember those.
Oh, I didn't do anything.
They just
It turned black. Should be it. Hit next slide and then. Oh, there we go. Just lose connection, man.
probably got a screw.
Yeah.
I couldn't silence it.
Okay. Does that look about right, you guys?
Don't forget to sign in.
Okay. All right. So here we go. These are the 4 species that when we talk about them, the general public list. So what do we have up here? A couple you mentioned already. Asian carp, right? Zebra mussels.
Ash borer.
Emerald ash borer, right? So they are very small, but blown up. That's what they look. They look like a little emerald beagle. How about we have them right back here? Yes, yep, sea lamprey. I don't know how many times you pull up an Atlantic salmon out here, what percentage, but I've caught plenty where there's one of those suckers right on the side and you hack them up. So I mean they're a very invasive species as well.
And
These are the most common.
the interesting thing about the emerald ash borer is that someone actually sees them and knows what they are and then tells the DNR.
Yes.
Then they say, no, that can't be. So, you know, it's one thing, we have the Asian longhorn beetle that's cross-contaminated. I said to the DNR that the emerald ash borer will cross-contaminate our ash.
Sure. I mean, we've had emerald ash borer. I mean, it was in Detroit at least since 1998. Probably before that, people just didn't know what they were looking at. And you know, really up here, especially in the Sioux area, our heyday for emerald ash borer was 2009 through 2012. It pretty much decimated. You know, I don't know what percentage of our ash trees, particularly black ash, which is I know tribally significant, ecologically significant, but also our green ash and our white ash, which is planted. Unfortunately, municipalities don't learn after accidents. So what did we do? We planted all the elm trees a long time ago. What happened to all the elm trees? Dutch elm disease. So we planted, what did we do instead? We planted nothing but ash trees. What happens when you have a pest that comes through that only feeds on ash? Now we don't have any ash trees up and down the road. So you think we've learned. So now we're starting to understand the true aspects of biodiversity. It's good to have no more than 20 to 30% of one particular species for a certain type of, you know, what you're trying to get out of the environment or aesthetics. But anyways, this is generally what we talk about when you hear invasive species. But, well, invasive plants. Mentioned purple loosestrife. That's great. Our focus today is going to be on invasive plants because, believe it or not, in the Eastern Upper Peninsula, we do have quite a few invasive plants. However, we do not have near the amount like downstate or western UP, Wisconsin. We're located in a very uniquely isolated location, which is our enemy sometimes as well as our ally. We can see things coming a little slower because it takes a lot longer for things to get here, so we can be prepared, we can be ready. Yeah, that's a lot of spotted knapweed. That's everywhere. That's everywhere, unfortunately. We can discuss that at the end for sure. So what's an invasive species? You know, everybody has different terms, but this is the term we use. This is the term a lot of different entities use as well. So an invasive species is a non-native plant or animal that has a negative impact on our native ecosystems, local economy, and even human health. Does that mean that everything that's non-native, that is not from around here, is invasive? No. Anybody know anything that's not from around here that we coexist with just fine? Smell, sure. Salmon we're going to introduce, sure. Any plants? Everybody's favorite Christmas tree. Colorado blue spruce, not from here. Yet we plant it by a dozen. Apple trees, everybody loves planting apple trees. We coexist with them just fine. Just because it is not from here does not mean it's invasive. So understanding what makes a species invasive, we'll understand a little bit more when we start talking about some of these different species, why we're caring actually, right? So we were just talking about Asian longhorn beetle. Anybody recognize this plant? It looks like a large Queen Anne's lace, can be 15, 20 feet tall. The DNR has done a really good scare tactic with this species over the last couple of years, especially downstate. Anybody recognize it?
Mustard? No.
Nope.
Mustard?
Nope, not mustard. That's actually the far right. This is, anybody heard of giant hogweed? Maybe not. So this is a species that is similar to different parsnip. It's a member of the carrot family, a parsnip species, and it actually has a phototoxic sap that if you get it on your skin can cause really nasty burns. Sometimes people even say if you get it in your eyes, it can cause permanent blindness, which is incredible. So that's a plant, right? Yeah. Bunch of tree huggers, who cares? You know, a bunch of plants. They're starting to actually harm humans. I mean, this is not just poison ivy here. Right? So we need to start thinking a little bit about that when it comes to human health as well, right? How it can directly impact us. Why do we care? Like I said, a lot of times we go to different, sportsmen's organizations. What's the point? Like I said, a bunch of tree huggers, a bunch of hippies out there. Well, you really have to understand that invasive species can impact every group, any demographic, any sort of organization or individual, regardless. Just because it's not in your backyard does not mean you're not being impacted by it in some way, shape, or form, right? We're in a huge area. In particular, I'm thinking Strong's, Newberry. We're in a huge timber industry up here, right? That is still going very strong, and it's a huge part of our economy. Maybe not directly right here, right in downtown Sault Ste. Marie, but in the EUP as a whole, the timber industry is still huge and it's thriving, right? So there's species out there that can actually reduce and degrade forest regeneration, preventing tree species from growing. You know, more than just planting tamarack or hemlock and the deer just eating away, right? We're in a big hunting and fishing community, right? Greg was talking about how much fishing goes on throughout the St. Mary's River corridor, right? Lots of people out there hunting and fishing. These species move in, eliminating food for these fish, for these wildlife. There's a species here that we have in town and over 204 locations called Japanese knotweed. Some people call it Michigan bamboo. This is a species we'll discuss a little bit more in detail that has evolved in volcanic ecosystems and has learned how to break through foundations, rock, concrete with its roots. So it can cost a lot of money for property owners. And of course, recreational opportunities. I know a huge aspect of this conference here is kind of celebrating the waterways, the bike trails, etc. Recreational opportunities. We want more folks in our area to recreate, to explore our natural features and for what they really are. Well, I mean, if there was bays like Bay Waskey, or if you had Munisquam Bay, or any of these really hotspot fishing or hunting areas, and we just have nothing but thick vegetation that you can't go 20 yards in your property going up in weeds. Who wants to do that? Do you think we're going to be able to hold a sustainable tourism industry or sportsman industry? No, right? So nobody's want to recreate if all of our areas and opportunities we're discussing today that everybody's celebrating is taken over by some of these species, right? Then we have nothing. So understanding why we care about these species, that we're not just a bunch of tree huggers, that we're not just out there caring about dandelions or some of these noxious weeds, but actually some of these species that can have really negative impacts to the three items that we previously discussed. Just a fun little fact, a lot of daunting words. I don't like a lot of words on slides. I feel it's a little more, you start snoring and then I gotta get some sort of thing to throw at you guys if you're sleeping, and I'm pretty sure this number has increased since. But just to give you a rough number, 13 to 15 billion throughout the world just on invasive plant management. We talked about invasive plants maybe not getting the limelight they rightfully deserve. Everybody's got Asian carpenter, which is very important, don't get me wrong. Milk or zebra mussels or lamprey or feral swine. Everybody loves the animal aspect. It just naturally comes to people. But also invasive plants are big business and it comes at quite a cost to manage. And we're going to talk about money when it comes to management in a second here. How do these invasive species get here? I'm sure a lot of us have heard, the old tales of the ballast water, which is the water that the large ships that we have right in our backyard take up from maybe across the ocean, wherever they're coming from, to balance out their journey across the ocean. Well, anything that water takes up, like different, plant fragments, like zebra mussels, like sea lamprey, anything that's in that water, well, what happens to that water when it gets over in the neck of the woods? They deposit it so then they can offload their shipment. Anything that's in that water is also deposited, right? So ballast water is a huge thing. Shipping pallets, we've discussed emerald ash borer, we've discussed Asian longhorn beetle. There's a lot of wood-boring insects that we have had over the years that if our shipping industries and trade industries have not grown like they have, we might not have that. But because of worldwide trade, shipping has become is expedited in terms of numbers. So a lot of more wood-boring insects that really have no native predators over here taking over and kind of destroying our natural resources in a sense. Some things like contaminated seeds. Let's talk about this for a minute. All right, you got a bald spot that somehow maybe your dog peed all over it, and everybody's had that bald spot in their yard. And I want to scrape it off. I want to reseed. Go to Tractor Supply, go to Pickford Feed, any of those places, and get your 5-pound bag of seed in there, sprinkle it down. What's in that seed? Yeah, you want grass, right? and it says right there in the label, I don't have to worry about it, right there on the front of the label, 99.8% weed-free. Anybody seen those advertised before? Right. You look on the back of it, you start to actually read the different species that's within that seed. You have things like thistle, you have things like knapweed, you have other various species that, what we call pioneer species, that once they get established, it establishes very quickly and very dense in a lot of different settings, like gravel pits, like areas that you just want vegetation coverage and you don't care. But so that's why when you start seeding, or maybe you do some stream bank stabilization and you're wanting grass along there, you also get weeds in there a lot of time, because a lot of places these days have contaminated seed sources, regardless of where it's coming from. And they can put as much chemical or fertilizer, anybody sprinkle those seeds across the ground, they're neon green or things like that. It's, those are certain chemicals on that to ensure that the grass is maintained. And a big issue that we're kind of dealing with is the ornamental industry, which is great. It's a great kind of local type of business to get a lot of different species out there. It's good. We already discussed not every species that is not from here is bad, but when you do have different nursery stocks, or even big box stores like Menards, you can go out and buy a couple of these species that we know is very detrimental to our local ecosystem. We didn't go buy it at Menards for $10 a plant or a shrub or anything like that. And kind of trying to work with these nurseries and these different industries to remove some of these species that we know can be detrimental and replace them with native species that have the exact same effect we're looking for, whether it's aesthetics, whether it's for functioning purposes, things like that. So how do these species spread? I'm sure every person in here at one point or another has picked a dandelion after it's went to, after it's the big puffball and blown it in the wind, right? What are you guys blowing in the wind? Seeds, right? Yeah. So the different way seeds or plant materials can spread. Some of the obvious things that we think about, right? Your wind, wildlife. I'm sure we've all got birds on our boots walking through trails. That's actually a seed from an invasive species called burdock. But some things we're not always thinking about, and this comes into play when we're talking about recreation, trail systems, kayaking, boating, is equipment, or your person, so to speak. You can get plant material, seeds, anything in the treads of your boots, sticking on the bottoms of your pants, on your equipment, anything like that, right? So it is important to recognize the importance of a bunch of stuff on my shoe. I should probably maybe just brush that off before I go into another area, especially if we're in like really nice, pristine shorelines or natural areas, right? We don't want to spread issues if you've been into an area with tons of spotted knapweed and things like that. Just a quick plug. Three short CISMA, it's another fun acronym. What it stands for is Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area. This is what I am the program coordinator for in the Conservation District. What it is a partnership. It's a grant-funded partnership with all these different entities coming together to manage invasive species throughout Chippewa, Luce, and Mackinac counties. We have 41 partners right now. Anything ranging from the DNR, Forest Service, the tribes, we have nurseries, the Gregory Gardens, I'm just out of town here, lots of different demographic of different entities coming together to manage these invasive species, because obviously, can the DNR just manage invasive species on state land and the problem solved? No. Can the tribe just manage on tribal land and everything solved? No, right? Can private residents just manage on their land? No, right? So everybody has to work together across all boundaries to successfully manage the species, and that's what this partnership is, and it was founded in 2010. Just to give you guys a look here, there's multiple management areas throughout the UP. As a coordinator, what this means for me in the East End, I can chat with folks over in Ontonagon or Menominee or Escanaba. Hey, what's coming in from the West End? What's Wisconsin trying to throw at us? Just keep an eye out. Throughout the state as well, it's becoming more and more of a thing. The state wants every county in the state of Michigan to be covered. Some not as practical as others. The Saginaw Bay. That's a lot of green right there. There's no way you're going to be successfully managing with that amount of counties. So getting it down to manageable levels, we have 3 counties, but we have 3 of the largest counties in the state of Michigan. So we cover a lot of ground. But once again, it's regional coordination. to see what we need to be on the lookout for when it comes to invasive species. What do we do? Kind of like what I'm doing here today, promoting education and awareness. The more eyes we have out there to be on the lookout for some of these species, the better, of course, right? We could be stopping the next emerald ash borer if we see something suspicious, right? Everything could lead to prevention. We could be preventing Asian longhorn beetle from moving in or things like that. This all comes into play when it comes to early detection, rapid response. That's the fun word that everybody uses. It's catching something early, or early enough before it's that big of a problem. Because most times when people start caring, is when it's already a problem or it's in their backyard and it's most time too late, right? So, or it's more of an issue than we really know. All comes into play with integrated pest management. There is not one particular method that anybody uses for managing invasive species. I mean, you have manual, mechanical, chemical, biocontrol, prescribed burning, drowning, manipulation. There's so many various methods to implement pest management to take into consideration. It is based on site specifics and plant specifics, understanding what you're getting into, right? So here's a question to ask that we get a lot. Is it worth it? Spotted knapweed. What is it worth it? Is the money there? Is it a losing battle? When is it too far gone, right? That's on everybody's mind. Being grant funded, we have to always take that in consideration. What's the money being for? So we have this invasion curve that we like to use. X-axis here we have time, y-axis cost and effort, okay? So at the time, right now, prevention, it's very low cost, very low effort to be promoting some of its, education, preventing it, setting up different guidelines to be on the lookout for. So it's relatively cheap to manage, right? There's nothing, and it's very early on in the time. Uh-oh, over down near Detroit, we have a hit or something, wherever that is. Introduction. Right now, if we could jump on that and eradicate that, we don't use the word eradicate very, very lightly when it comes to invasive species, but if we could eradicate that single infestation, it's still low in cost and effort, right? It doesn't cost that much and we could jump on it and we'd have good results. Maybe start to trickle a little bit more. We didn't jump on it in time. Start to spread. Eradication is still possible with very small isolated populations. And let's not think of this at a statewide level, but even down to a very localized level. It's in your backyard. Ooh, there's a thistle. Most thistles are invasive. We do have native thistles, but a lot of thistles you have in your backyard are going to be invasive. If you have one, they connect under their root systems. So if you have one, over time, just like aspen or poplar, they're going to start spreading laterally. But if you get that one, maybe you won't have an issue, right? Get on it early. Eradication there. Ah, shoot, it spread all throughout, right? So when it comes to control or containment at this level, and look what our cost and effort did, skyrocketed, right? Not to say that, we don't have a ton up in the UP or maybe in West Michigan. Let's keep those areas protected. Let's keep what we are deeming, valuable protected. And that's where our efforts and money should go to. Not down to the source infestation where it might be already too late. But let's work from the outside and protect our areas that aren't infested yet and work on our little outlying infestations. Taking over. First thing everyone pops in their head is spotted knapweed. It's in every county, it's everywhere, right? This is what we call asset-based protection because spotted knapweed is everywhere. When we are managing things like spotted knapweed, we have to be doing it for a very specific reason. And for us, that reason is protecting pristine shorelines, protecting areas where there's threatened or endangered species, which we have various species of in the state of Michigan. And that's where we deem our money is well spent at, is protecting the assets that, in the state of Michigan, we deem the most valuable. And that's going to be on a site-by-site specification, not out in the, right along the sidewalk where it's growing in the cracks or on the roadsides, but in the areas that we really want to protect that does not have this spotted knapweed or whatever it may be. All right. So the EUP priority invasive species. Like I said, there's a daunting list we could chat about, but these are the species that we like to highlight when we do these talks. When the wall's not falling. Those species, and you'll notice some of them we're going to talk about are terrestrial, some of them are riparian, which means along the water's edge or in wetlands, and some of them are aquatic. So lots of different varieties. Garlic mustard. Who here has heard of garlic mustard? Only one. So this is good. That's good that more people are going to learn about today. European frogbit. That's the real name. Japanese knotweed. Invasive Phragmites. Himalayan balsam. Okay, so we're gonna chat about all these. We're gonna go till 11:30. I think we have enough time. 11:45. Okay, so let's get started here on some of these different specifics. Garlic mustard. Garlic mustard is a species that was brought over here from Europe back in the 1800s, and it was actually planted in people's gardens as an herb. You can go and pluck the leaves of garlic mustard and crush it, and you smell a very aromatic, garlicky smell. And that's how people planted it. However, it's a mustard, which mustard species produce some of the smallest seeds out there. And so for seeds to blow out from people's gardens into the adjoining hardwood forest and there be nothing to control it is exactly what happened. And so it loves shaded hardwood stands. Who here doesn't like a shaded hardwood stand, right? Everybody loves if you find a great pocket of oak and maple or beech. You do find beech anymore. I'm thinking like down towards Cedarville, Rockview, that type of area. I mean, it's beautiful, right? The colors are changing right now. It's great. Well, garlic mustard can come into an area like that and just decimate the understory.
Purple little flowers on there?
They're white. They're white. Yep. We'll zoom in here in a couple minutes. So it dominates the forest floor, blanketing it. We're going to see a picture of what it actually can do. There's some plants there, right? A huge issue with garlic mustard. We were talking about how some plants can actually chemically, alter like the stuff that was burning people's skin. Garlic mustard inhibits or puts an inhibitor chemical into the soil that destroys growth within the soil for other species around it, and including mycorrhizal fungi, which is a needed fungus in the soil to allow tree regeneration, so tree seedlings. So garlic mustard is not allowing any other species but garlic mustard to grow, and especially no other tree seedlings. Very detrimental to forest health. So when we start talking about economy, what's this doing to our timber industry? Could this have serious impacts in terms of money? Big time, right? In terms of recreation or hunting, deer will not eat this stuff. They move out of an area. You say, oh, just put some deer in there, they'll eat it. It's that smell. They will not eat garlic mustard. Grouse will not forage in it. They will not, put a nest in there or anything like that. It's the smell. It's a very potent smell. So why is it doing so well? Let's think about this, and not just in terms of garlic mustard, but in terms of everything. There is nothing here in the Eastern Upper Peninsula to keep it in check. Over where it's from in Europe, there's lots of different things. Insects and probably, different herbivores over there maybe that kept the garlic mustard in check. Over here, it's a foreign land for it, right? And there's nothing here to keep it in check. And so it has the ability to spread very quickly. And unfortunately, we had it in the Sioux. We found it 2 years ago over near the shallows and some of the shaded hardwood stands over there, right in the neighborhood near Bermuda and a couple other areas. So we do have it here. This is what the issue of garlic mustard can be. This is taken down at the Cut River Bridge. If anybody's familiar with Cut River Bridge, down near EUP, 1 US 2, 1 Lake Michigan. This was our largest infestation of garlic mustard. We mapped back in 2010 86 acres of garlic mustard, which sounds like a lot, but when you think downstate, where they have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of acres that you go down there and make, and it is just everywhere. 86 some acres is not a whole heck of a lot, which is nice for us. We have the ability to catch it, but this is what we call monoculture. So beech forest, so it's probably a maple beech forest. you know, what would you have under there originally, especially in the springtime? You have trout lilies, ferns, tons of trillium.
How did you kill it?
Yep, so we're going to get into that. Yep. But first, we need to understand garlic mustard, understand what it looks like. It's a biennial, which means it has a 2-year growth cycle. First year, it comes up as a rosette, just like a lot of different species that are biennials come up as a rosette form, and then they change shape, change what it looks like, change phenology as it grows into its second year adult stage. But it forms these rosettes, which are, look like maybe the size of a 50-cent piece, all the way to a size of maybe a softball, some large rosettes. And they remain green throughout the entire winter. You just can't see them because we get 3+ feet of snow, right? So, but the shape, they're kidney shaped with scalloped edges. So keep that in mind when it comes to the shape of the leaf. So here's the little white flower there. It's a four-petal little white flower. And this is what happens in the second year plants. They pop up. They can be generally on average about 3 feet tall. And the shape of that leaf, though, is what the important thing. It's very conspicuous. It's very triangular, very toothed. It doesn't mean it's sharp, but it's just that's the shape of the leaf is toothed. And when all else fails, just like we discussed in the beginning, if you suspect it's garlic mustard and it has not produced a flower yet, just grab one of those leaves, crush it, sniff it with your hand. It will emit a very potent garlicky odor, which is huge in terms of identification. And up here, depending on our winters and springs, but generally it is starting to flower beginning of June, especially up here. So be on the lookout for that. After it flowers, just like every other mustard species, it will produce these seed pods. It's actually pods with lots of little seeds in there, and they will come out of the stalk and grow, kind of grow upward towards the sun. Kind of is very unique. If anybody's familiar with like fireweed has those big seed pods that produce similar to that. European frogbit is the next species we're going to discuss, and one person has heard of European frogbit, which is better than some audiences, I can say for sure. It's not the reeds, it's not the cattails, it's not the large lilies, it's these little miniature lily pads right here on the bottom. These pictures were all taken from me out in Muskogong and Raver Bay, which is where these infestations are. What is European frogbit? It is native to Eastern Europe. Yay, Europe. It was brought over here for ornamental purposes. If anybody's familiar with, some people like to have like water gardens or these ponds in their backyards that they have all these exotic, vibrant species, exotic species that they bring over for decorative purposes. This is one of them that they brought over here, and it is a very well-documented infestation, spread of infestation, unfortunately. It was brought over here in the 30s or 40s, actually to Canada. It's one of the only species that we know, there's a couple others, but especially with European frogbit, that has come from the north. A lot of everything we have comes from the south. Kind of interesting. So this species was brought to a water garden facility in Canada, in Ontario actually, and Quebec, I believe, as well. Did 2 different ones. It escaped cultivation, kind of moved down drainways, made it its way. It's in a couple of different counties in the state of Michigan, near Tawas and Fletcher's Pond, I believe, downstate. A couple other small northern ponds. And of course, yay, us in Chippewa County, we have it in Muskogong and Raver Bay. So it's very frustrating. What it is, it's a free-floating species that resembles a miniature lily pad. It free floats, like I said, and it needs that slow wave action locations. So you're not going to find it out in the middle of the river. You're not going to find it out where there's any sort of wave action. It's going to be in the bays, inlets, ditches, more stagnant waters. And it forms these dense mats, as you can see, across the entire water column. And it has these tangling root systems that's just kind of hanging there. So if you can envision the whole top of the water is being shaded out, what's going on in terms of that entire water column? Is there any sunlight penetrating down to whatever, benthic zone, any depth of that water? Is there any sunlight penetrating? No, right? How about fish passage? Do you think any sort of fish is going to be able to swim through a tangled mess? No. And in summertime, during ducks breeding, ducks swim up into the inlets and they lay their eggs on shore. This stuff's so thick, ducks get tangled in it, and they believe sometimes ducks are actually potentially spreading it. This species does spread from fragmentation, just like a lot of other aquatic species, which means that all it takes is about an inch of plant material to break off, drift down to the next bay, the next inlet, and start a new colony. So thinking about that. Another huge issue with European frogbit in the fall time, so about in another, I don't know, month, within the next month, this stuff will start dying off. Hey, great, you know, that's great. They'll all turn brown and start decomposing. Well, what's going on when it starts decomposing? It's using all of the oxygen, it dissolves oxygen in the water, which is very, very important to the health of that water body. You know, lots of other aquatic species need that, fish need that, and this European frogbit, as it dies off, is depleting the oxygen content, essentially making the water, you know, unbearable to live in. Very, very nasty. So, like I said, it resembles a very small lily pad, and it produces in July and August a very small white flower with a yellow center. There's only 3 white petals on the flower. It reproduces from fragmentation, and the way we know it has established itself is like a lot of other aquatic species, they produce these buds in the fall time. And in the fall time, when the plant starts to die off, those buds are accepting all of its nutrient and energy from that year. It's storing it in those buds, and it just drops off and it floats down and just remains in the sediment until the next summer, where it pops up and oh my gosh, there's European frogbit out of nowhere. It saved itself essentially. So in terms of invasive species, this is our newest invader that we have. It was just discovered only a couple of years ago, believe it or not. Like I said, we do have it in Muskong and Raver Bay. My staff, we have been mapping via kayak, because there's no way you're getting even flat bottom boats into some of these really, really stagnant water areas throughout Muskong Raver. You have to get in there pretty good to see if you can find them or not. So we have mapped officially from Kemp's Point. There was the new boat launch down here, from Kemp's Point all the way down to the Raver Bay public boat launch via kayak over the last couple of years, which is quite a bit, all the way through the remote areas of Roach Point, and you know, there's a lot of areas that it's found in. It is not found north of the Little Muskong mouth. However, right around the dike is where it is the worst, and it has trickled all the way through, and it does connect all the way to Raven Bay Boat Launch. How it got here, most likely we envision, let's think about where we're finding it. Those stagnant areas, especially near the dike system. What's going on about this time of year in stagnant waters near the dike system? Anybody know? Duck hunting. So our hypothesis, no way of proving it, right? But our hypothesis is that guys from downstate were coming up and they unfortunately had plant material, maybe on their boats, and they're going near the, Muskong Bay is huge for duck hunting, right? And they went along the dike and probably deposited some, and over the years and of course not knowing about it, DNR didn't even know what it was when we found it. It has to get large enough for then all of a sudden people to care, unfortunately. It comes back down to early detection or rapid response. If we can know what something is and we can find it fast, it's huge, right? And so what we're doing is we've been doing a lot of manual removal in heavy use areas, such as docks, boat launches, public access points. We do not want to spread this any more than it already is. And there's different various practices going on by different research groups involving mechanical harvesting. They're doing a couple of different applications to see if any of that works. But since 2013, Three Shore CISMA has partnered with moving over 10,000 pounds of European frogbit biomass, which is a very good compost, actually, believe it or not. We don't say compost invasive species, especially terrestrial, but when you let it dry out for about 2 weeks' time, European frogbit dies off very, very nicely. And we've actually tried rehydrating it, the dead material, and when it's dead, which is really nice. So just a couple of pictures from efforts. You know, we hire a lot of Lake State students as summer technicians, which is great. We love to have students up here get involved in our area specifically, but we also have students from, you know, Grand Valley, Central, Michigan Tech, Northern. We have a lot of students from across Michigan that come and are summer technicians for the season, which is exciting for us. We get a lot of work done with our staff and our partners. So as you can see, you know, some of this area you might be able to get flat bottom in, maybe with a mud buddy or beaver tail, but the other areas it is so thick that you really kayaking is the only way. So, you know, does it hurt that you get paid to go out and kayak with some of these students? And, it's kind of, those are fun days, you know, when you can enjoy your work sometimes. It's enjoyable. Japanese knotweed. A couple of you maybe heard of Japanese knotweed. This is also called Michigan bamboo at times. That's a picture of me. I'm like 5'10", and that is an infestation. One of our larger ones, certainly not our largest we've ever seen, but that's, you know, what, 15 feet tall, maybe 20 feet tall in some areas. It is an impenetrable jungle that is literally, it's bamboo-like. It is hollow, a succulent species that we'll get into. This is actually now where Myers is. So they got rid of it and they built over it, and it's kind of exciting to see a place like that was just a kind of a city dump. They would have a lot of junk out there, and of course this is how that got there, and now there's Myers, just crazy stuff. So what is Japanese knotweed? Japanese knotweed is an ornamental species, once again, that was brought over here for specific reasons. But before we talk about that, let's get into its evolution over time. Japanese knotweed evolved in the volcanic ecosystems of Asia. So what that means is a volcano would erupt, lava would spew everywhere, get everywhere, kill everything, right? Over time, Japanese knotweed has evolved to react to these catastrophic events by, yes, it is top killing it, but it's evolved these extensive, very, very strong root systems, very large root systems, sometimes 16 to 20 feet deep, that during a very stressful event, these species has learned to grab as much nutrients and energy as possible and pull it to the root system and wait out the storm, so to speak, wait out that stressful situation. So the lava rock would cool, everything is calm again, the volcano's done. Okay, there's no more stress. This species is ready to begin growing again. It has so much energy reserved in that root system. It learned to break through lava rock. And I'm not saying it learned like it has, but it has evolved to break through lava rock with the extensive energy that it is stored in its system. And so when it comes to thinking about this, breaking through mortar, breaking through concrete, asphalt, anything like that, do you think it has any problem dealing with that if it's stressed out? Nah. So it has, and it has done that many a time we've documented in the Eastern Upper Peninsula. Let's keep that in mind when we're talking, I guess, plant reaction or plant behavior. It was introduced in the 1800s over here because of how thick and dense and tall it can grow. And it's very, it displays very well. The leaves are very large on it. And so a lot of times people planted it as what we call a live barrier. So if you hated your next door neighbor, you just put some of this in between your guys' houses, and in 2 years' time you had a huge wall of vegetation. Similar to like what people do with cedar and things like that, which we prefer if they did with cedar. It's a native species, right? But as you can see in the previous picture, it just chokes out all native species, forming this dense jungle, not allowing any sunlight in for other species, and it just kind of can wreak havoc, especially underground with its root structures. And once again, it causes serious foundation damage if it's stressed or if it needs to grow. We talked about some of the foundation damage. This is a house that was close behind Dairy Queen here in town. And the issue with this was, this is in the springtime when it's growing, but the nice lady that contacted us to get rid of it, as part of her summer chores, she would go down in her basement once a week and cut away her bamboo that's growing through her wall in her basement. That was just normal maintenance for her. Let's think about that now in terms of, economic impact. Say she wants to go and sell that house. Is there any sort of situation when it comes to foundation and structural integrity? Are you going to be able to sell that house if you have to compromise structure? No, right? So how much is it to start, repairing a foundation of a home? Pretty costly, I imagine, right? And it's by a plan. This is crazy, right? So, we went in, we were able to do it, and I believe she's on repairs for her house now, which is exciting. So, but just to show you that, anybody can pull pictures offline, but when we have pictures affecting us in our own backyards, it kind of helps people connect a little more and understand the importance a little more. How do you identify it? There's not a whole heck of a lot out there, you guys, that resembles bamboo in our area. If it looks like bamboo, more than likely it's this stuff, and we know we have a lot of it out here. 2014, 2015, we did a grant-funded project mapping. It was a street-wide, street and sidewalk city survey within the boundaries of Sault Ste. Marie. We found 203 separate infestations of Japanese knotweed just within the city limits of the Sioux. That doesn't include what we couldn't see from the roads, what's in people's backyards behind sheds that you can't see, anything. This was just what was visible from sidewalks and roads when we would walk and drive. That's incredible, right? So this was planted a long time ago by people in the 50s, 60s, 70s, even today. I have a picture I'll show you here. We'll get into that in a second. Bamboo-like stem. It's hollow and it has the nodes just like bamboo, and when it dries and dies off in the wintertime, it has these hollow stalks that, I grew up with this stuff in my backyard. I thought it was the coolest thing. I built forts with it. Me and my brother would sword fight with the dried stalks, It's been around for a while. And it's very bamboo-like. Deep taproot, like we were discussing, and the spade-shaped leaves. So the different varieties of knotweed, it's all knotweed, but the leaves can range in these kind of spade shape, just like spades on playing cards. The leaves can be anywhere from this large to the giant knotweed can be this large. Very, very crazy species. And in August time, in September, it flowers and it produces little white flowers. It's pretty vibrant. So this is a picture I was going to get into and discuss about people planting it and moving around. It is actually illegal to move this plant in the state of Michigan. You can be fined, or you cannot move it, transport it, transplant it. It is a very nasty species that the state has now put into law. You cannot move. But we were going to do surveys on Drummond Island one day, and we're going up, and there's a nice dogwood tree someone just planted. We got closer. It's not dogwood. This is Japanese knotweed someone had just planted. And where did they take these plants from? They loved it so much. Where did they take it from? There's a very large infestation that used to exist next to the Superflight gas station down on Easter Day, right next door to it. It's been around for a long time. These people talked to the landlord. They loved it. Oh, can we have some? Yeah, sure. Come up and dug up a couple pieces, just like trees. So they're still moving it around. We're still finding it, but we're trying to deter that, right? So it does exist. And it can spread from contaminated filter. This is a species that, you need a little bit more than an inch, but if you're mowing it down with a lawnmower and you're chopping it up and flicking it away, it can sprout from some of those chopped up pieces, a new plant, which is crazy. And so the issue with this plant, a lot of people have tried to get rid of it by themselves over the years, Roundup or mowing it or anything like that. None of these it's pretty much trivial. The real issue is, once again, that root system. You need to get it from the roots up. And so over the years, it's been developed. There's a pretty specific herbicide treatment that you have to apply it at a certain time of the year. When that plant is starting to prepare itself for winter, it's sending all of its nutrients down into the root system to store away for the winter. So then in spring, it can come up. Well, when you do it at that specific time of year, where's that specific herbicide going to go? Right into the deep root system and kill it from the roots up. If you're just going to put Roundup on it, you need something that will move through the plant, not just top kill it. We learned about top killing, and it would not work. So years and years of trivial pursuit has led to, it's a pretty scientific process. There's times where we're even going and you inject individual stalks to make sure that it's just simply going right into the root system. So very timed treatment that has to be done properly. Invasive Phragmites. We got about 10 minutes, so we can move through this. Anybody here heard of invasive Phragmites or seen it? Sure. So this is a species that if you head down Saginaw Bay, you head west of Green Bay, any of these types of places, it's horrific. It is bad. I mean, thousands upon thousands of acres. You just see the sea of Phragmites moving in the wind, especially right now. It's all tasseled out. That's the seed it's producing. What is it? It's essentially a very tall grass that has made its way into our area that produces these spikelets on top. And there is a native version of Phragmites. We don't need to get into that. We'll talk about the invasive kind today. But we talked about ballast water in the beginning. The ships moving the water across, and invasive Phragmites unfortunately came over from that type of a ballast water and started invading the Great Lakes ecosystem. So it really does need that wet, moist ecosystem to invade. So wetlands, shorelines, even roadside ditches where water collects, invasive Phragmites can grow. And it's a very, very tall reed. It's a grass-like species. And it just chokes out all vegetation within a wetland. This stuff will choke out cattails. If anybody knows or you've seen how thick cattails grow, invasive Phragmites will choke out cattails, which is quite a statement to say. Love this picture, and I'll tell you why in a minute. How do you identify it? It's a very large perennial grass that's growing 6 to 20 feet tall, and we do have 20-foot tall Phragmites here in the EUP we have found. And this is why I love this picture so much, to show you what's going on not only up top, on top of the soil surface, which is right here, but below the soil surface. A lot of people, we just see what's on top. Yes, it's dog hair thick up there with all of the plant material, but what's going on underneath that soil? It's these rhizomes, or these tubular-like root systems that are spreading laterally throughout the soil, sucking as much water and nutrients up as possible. And as it spreads laterally and all throughout, it's popping up new adult plants as it goes, every couple of inches. So we can imagine how thick and how fast it grows. These rhizomes can grow 16 feet a year laterally. So it can grow very, very quickly in a very short amount of time. In late summer, early fall, just like now, it's producing dark pointed spikelets. So they're purplish to brownish. These are the seeds that are starting to form. It's the flower. The seeds are not yet formed yet, but it's the flower. As I mentioned, there is a native Phragmites, which we do have quite a bit of in the Eastern Upper Peninsula. The biggest thing I tell people when it comes to Phragmites, telling the difference, the native Phragmites will have almost a blood red color at the bottom of the stem. The invasive won't. If you can remember that one little thing, it's going to help you if you're ever questioning what the difference is. But we have lots of materials. Get on our website. We don't need to go into the details of that. This was taken out in Muskong Bay years ago when we only had one little patch of it out there. Very rarely do you have side-by-side comparisons in nature. It's very difficult sometimes. But this is nice. The fact that we do have some native Phragmites over here. You see a spikelet here. It's only 6 feet tall, something like that. Other species, if you were to zoom in, are growing within invasive Phragmites. You can't see through. There's no other species in there. And look at this, just the size comparison as well. You can envision how it can outcompete and outdominate. And this is scattered throughout. We even have treated it on Mackinac Island. So you're talking, once again, economy. If you were to see invasive Phragmites all along the shoreline, would anybody be able to bike around the island and enjoy the views? No, right? So luckily, they only had 8 small infestations we were able to go in and take care of. And once again, this is an herbicide treatment that has been well documented over about 40-45 years now, where it's a fall application just like Japanese knotweed. That the plant is starting to prepare for winter. You put it on a specific time, and we just saw the root system. It's going to kill it from the roots, which is what you want. Then we can go in and do a prescribed burn, or we can mow in the wintertime to get rid of all that dead biomass. And we have maybe 1 or 2 little things that come up the next year in the fall, so we'll go and we'll actually do what's called the glove of death, which is we take it and we put a little bit of that chemical on our hand, and we'll put it on one single individual plant, and we walk away. Very easy, and we have really good results. This is down near Wildwoods. which is along US 2 near Brevoort. This was a very large infestation. This is one of my technicians here. He's probably 6 feet or something, and it's just a wall of Phragmites along the shoreline. So let's think about this in terms of economics again. There's a really nice house way back here. How much did the people pay for their Lake Michigan front shoreline? How much are you paying in taxes? How much did you pay originally? I don't know last time they saw their beach or used their beach. So do you think that has any sort of impact if they were to want to go and resell it? Sure, right? So just in a 2-year time frame, we can reclaim that beach. And the exciting thing for us, especially in this second year picture, we have native species that are growing back exactly where that Phragmites was. The reason being, we have given it relief. That Phragmites is gone at that point. The native plants still have that seed bank in that soil. It's finally given it a chance to come up and start growing again, which is exactly what we want. We not only want to get rid of it, we want to reestablish the native species that should have been there in the first place. The last one that we're going to chat about is Himalayan balsam, real quick. Himalayan balsam is a fairly new species that we've been managing. Sioux, Ontario, Canada has had it over the past 10 probably plus years, and likely this is where we got it from. It is a very aggressive herbaceous annual species that grows in wetland or wet type settings. If anybody's familiar with jewelweed, jewelweed is a very native species that kind of can grow. If you know jewelweed, you will very much so be able to identify Himalayan balsam because it's essentially the larger purple cousin of jewelweed. The flowers look very similar, and we will see that in a minute. The issue with Himalayan balsam, talk about its root system too, is the nectar issue. You know, especially right now, we're learning about colony collapse. The pollinators are, we're losing pollinators. Yes, this is good that this plant produces a high volume of nectar to attract pollinators. Hey, great. We are all for promoting that. However, this species grows so thick, so prevalent, and outcompetes everything that now the bees, the butterflies, the hummingbirds, all these are feeding on it. They don't have to go to any other species to get their nectar. They're simply sticking with the Himalayan balsam, and that's it. So now, are we actually getting our pollination that we need between all the different native species? No. So we're seeing declines in our native species where Himalayan balsam has moved in and taken over areas. Very interesting. It has declined, or it has negatively impacted pollinator behavior. Kind of interesting to think about. We're finding more and more of these spots now. Ever since we've been serving for them 2 years ago, one of our largest spots is actually right next to the tannery. There's a patch of it right there, which we know right there, over in Ontario, there's a large infestation. So that probably can figure where it came from. But we're also finding a couple of inland locations where we think people have planted it over time. So garden ornamental. Just this year, it's not even on our map, just this year we discovered out literally downtown Brimley, not Bay Mills, but Brimley, there is, we're thinking 20 plus acres of it all throughout people's backyards, along the Waishki River, a couple of other headwater areas. So we're actually going to be trying to do some sort of town meeting this winter to educate landowners about this species. As you can see here, it's a large, some people call it a policeman's helmet, or a fairy's cap is what they call it. It's a very unique, almost orchid-like flower that allows pollinators to come in and get the nectar very easily. So they don't allow, it's not like an orchid where they have to fly up or other different species. They access it, get it very easily. The stems are semi-hollow and they are reddish to green in color, which is kind of unique. The leaves are very serrated, just like jewelweed, just larger. Just to show you a couple pictures, this is from Sioux, Ontario right here. It can grow 15 feet tall, which is crazy. We've not seen it that tall over here yet, but it doesn't mean maybe it hasn't been. And this is a picture just to show along the shorelines. We might think, hey, this is great, stream stabilization, very quick growing species right along stream, awesome. The issue is, I don't know if I have it, no, I don't. The root system, it's a very shallow root system. The stem comes down and the roots literally just look like that, and that is it. So if you have all this biomass, all this loose soil that you're wanting to stabilize along a bank, do you think a teeny little root system like that is doing anything? No, so it's actually worsening the bank stabilization because you have a huge biomass and a very shallow root system. It's providing no bank stability, which is very interesting. This is a good side-by-side between jewelweed, which maybe some of you, you've seen this flower now. Oh yeah, I've seen that, and the Himalayan balsam. Pretty good comparison in terms of size. The sense of it's about at least a third of the size larger than jewelweed. I think we're almost out of time, or if not out of time, so I'll just highlight these. We do have purple loose strife, which we manage, and we are very aware of the negative impacts of wetlands, as well as wild parsnip along roadsides. This is a species you don't want to get tangled up in because it can give you rashes and burns, both invasive. We don't have these, but we need to be on the lookout for Asian longhorn beetle, potentially the next emerald ash borer moving into our area. Decimates maple trees. So what percentage of Michigan is maple trees? Huge, right? And it can form huge boring holes. And swallower, we know is in Emmett County, just below the bridge, too close for comfort for us. This is a species, we'll get back on talking pollinators just real quick. This is a species that is related to milkweed. It produces milkweed-like pods that this species tangles and grows along the forest floor, produces these milkweed-like pods. However, they produce a toxic sap. So monarchs, right? Monarchs lay, they need to lay their eggs for their larvae on milkweed pods. Hey, this smells like milkweed, that's great. They'll lay it, all of a sudden, all the larvae dies because the pod is actually toxic. So where they are seeing swallower, they're seeing huge declines in monarch populations, which is affecting wildlife populations as well. We don't need to get into that. This is just to show you some numbers as 3-shore CISMA is growing and continuing to manage invasive species in our area. This is 2016 numbers. We're still working in 2017, so our numbers, we're managing more and more land with different partners, different private landowners and public landowners as well. So what can you get involved? We have different volunteer pull events throughout the summer, throughout the season. We become a partner, learn more about invasive species. Hey, if you learned one thing, remember one of these species up here, oh, I've seen that. That's what that weird weed guy was talking about that one day. We went, if something clicks in your head that you can pull away from today, just one thing, I've done my job, So I appreciate the way you guys have let me chat to you a little bit about invasive species, and hopefully you learned something. So with that, thank you very much. And I don't know what our time frame is, but if anybody has any questions after, feel free to.
Yeah, and Nick, I'm sure people do have questions and would like to talk to you. We've got about 45 minutes for lunch. The next session is about 12:30, so people are very interested in this stuff. They become emotionally involved. They getting volunteers is straight enough not all that difficult if the word gets out. So please use Nick and ask your questions. And in 45 minutes, we start up again.
I do have some business cards here. I didn't know if I was supposed to bring materials or whatever. I could have brought materials, but I do have some business cards if anybody's interested in getting in touch with me. I am, like I said, located in the Conservation District office, which is up on Ashman, like you're heading out of town on 129. That spin of Ashman over by Tribal Health and Social Security office. So feel free to stop into our office, chat, anything like that as well. So anybody have any questions? Yes.
You didn't mention spotted knapweed.
Just briefly in the beginning. You missed that highlight. Pretty much when we do manage spotted knapweed in certain areas, however, because we have discussed that it is so widespread, we manage it in asset-based locations only. And in terms of what that means is where we know spotted knapweed is not, or where we want to keep it from encroaching. So our really nice Lake Superior shorelines that don't have invasive species, areas that we have threatened or endangered species, both plant and animal species, we want to make sure that spotted knapweed is not encroaching into those ecosystems and getting taken over. In terms of fields, backyards, things like that. It is ever, and you do have to pick and choose battles in this game because you can get overwhelmed very easily, and you really have to take the little wins when you can get them. but what we are doing is for a reason, you know, and we are protecting, you know, different resources in the Eastern Upper Peninsula that is still worth protecting, and we have to keep that in mind.
Well, one of the interesting things is, at first I didn't recognize one of your invasive things.
Sure.
Just rhetorically, it was identified to me when we bought our house at 710 Court Street, and there were balsams everywhere, and then I began to see what it was, and like you said,
Sure.
it's very shallow, it's very, it's relatively attractive,
It's very pretty.
but yeah,
Yeah.
it's not a good thing.
Yep, it's understanding the plant, what it's doing,
Yeah.
and we're talking, you know, pretty and aesthetically pleasing. A lot of these species were planted because they're aesthetically pleasing. Purple loosestrife. People loved buying purple loosestrife and putting it in little parts of their garden. And I mean, it's a very pretty plant. And it forms the really pretty purple spikelets in the summer. I mean, it's gorgeous.
How do you get rid of it?
So there's different ways, yeah. In certain areas, especially we manage purple loosestrife along the river corridor, especially with the high water these last couple years. It's been wonderful. We can actually remove the whole plant. Inland settings, a little more difficult than that. If you're talking removing the whole plant, you actually have to dig up the root ball and remove the plant. Inland settings, what we've learned to do works the best is allow it to flower, but before it seeds, what we're doing is we're cutting right below the flower, we're bagging flowers, and then we're taking weed whackers and just whacking, cutting the biomass down so that it has no more energy reserve in that root to form a viable seed bank. So do that year after year, for as long as the seed bank is there. You know, people might think, oh, I did it. What the heck? It's back next year. Managing invasives is not an overnight game, like by any means. And if we think it is, then we're all fools because it has found time to establish, right? So we need to find out how long it's been here and manage it for as long as that seed bank is there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.